Our neighborhood had always been quiet, maybe too quiet. HOA Karen ruled over our streets with an iron fist, clipboard in hand, ready to pounce on the tiniest violation. A crooked mailbox. That was a $250 fine. A garden gnome slightly over a foot tall. Another notice. Life here was orderly, predictable, boring. That all changed the day I noticed a moving truck pulling up next door. At first, I thought it was just another family moving in, but the moment I saw the black SUVs, uniformed security, and crates marked fragile, celebrity property, I knew something was different. Word spread like wildfire. Within hours, the entire neighborhood was buzzing. Keanu Reeves was moving in next door. At first, I didn't believe it either. Keanu Reeves. My quiet suburban street. The idea seemed impossible, absurd, and yet, the evidence was right in front of me. The moving crew was meticulous, polite, and clearly trained to handle someone important. Cameras flashed as the actors and crew carried furniture, and one of the neighbors whispered that the man himself had been spotted signing papers in the foyer. It was surreal, like Hollywood had dropped into our little cul-de-sac. Of course, HOA Karen didn't take the news well. I saw her pacing in her yard, muttering to herself about rules and precedent. She stormed over to the moving crew, arms crossed, demanding to see permits, questioning the legitimacy of every crate, and naturally, insisting that Keanu Reeves must abide by HOA regulations. The movers, polite but firm, explained that everything was legal, all permits were filed, and Mr. Reeves simply wanted to settle in. Karen's face turned red. I could almost hear her brain short-circuiting under the stress of dealing with a Hollywood legend in her perfectly color-coded neighborhood. Neighbors peeked over fences and leaned out windows, whispering excitedly about the spectacle. Some were thrilled, finally, some excitement. Others were nervous, knowing that HOA Karen would stop at nothing to enforce her rules, even against a movie star. I pulled out my phone and began recording discreetly. The camera captured every dramatic gesture. Karen pointing at the movers like she was directing a courtroom, the crew's patient smiles, and a few kids gawking in awe as they realized Keanu might be living just a few houses down. Social media was about to explode. By the time the sun set, it was clear that nothing in our neighborhood would ever be the same. HOA Karen retreated to her office, or what she called her office, furious, muttering about bylaws, neighborhood integrity, and some vaguely threatening comment about enforcing the rules. Meanwhile, I couldn't stop grinning. The stage was set. A legendary actor next door, a tyrannical HOA losing control, and me, right in the middle of it all, capturing history in real time. The calm of our suburban street was gone. Drama had arrived, and it had a name, Keanu Reeves. By the next morning, the neighborhood was in full frenzy. HOA Karen had called an emergency board meeting, which she described in her emails as a matter of utmost urgency for the safety and decorum of our community. The agenda: Keanu Reeves. Apparently, having a world-famous actor in our cul-de-sac violated some unspoken law of suburban normalcy. I watched from my porch as Karen marched down the street with a clipboard, flanked by a few overzealous board members who nodded at everything she said, clearly caught up in the hysteria. The scene looked like something out of a sitcom, a tiny woman leading a crusade against a Hollywood superstar who hadn't even stepped outside yet. Inside the HOA meeting, the discussion quickly descended into absurdity. Karen rattled off potential violations with the precision of a seasoned prosecutor. He may host outdoor screenings without a permit, she warned. His motorcycles could disturb the peace. What if fans come? Every suggestion grew increasingly ridiculous. Meanwhile, the rest of the board nodded nervously, clearly terrified of challenging her. I had to stifle a laugh. Keanu Reeves had no idea he was about to be the target of a suburban witch hunt, and Karen was fully committed to turning this into the battle of her life. Word of the meeting leaked, and soon, neighbors were gathering in small groups outside, buzzing with curiosity. Some were excited, whispering about the chance to meet him. Others were skeptical, worried about HOA drama escalating. I decided to take a stroll toward Keanu's new home, keeping a safe distance to observe. Through the trees, I caught a glimpse of him, calm, unassuming, and entirely unbothered. He waved to a neighbor who had come to introduce themselves, smiled politely, and then retreated inside. He radiated this effortless, I'm just a neighbor energy that only made Karen's panic worse. The conflict escalated when the HOA sent Keanu a formal letter outlining every rule they expected him to follow, from lawn height restrictions to the color of curtains visible from the street. I couldn't help but chuckle as I read it. Phrases like, "to preserve the sanctity of our community aesthetic," and "any deviation may result in penalties," were sprinkled throughout. Keanu's response was polite, almost zen. He acknowledged receipt, expressed his intent to follow the law, and added a friendly note thanking them for their concern. Karen, of course, interpreted this calm demeanor as mockery. The tension in the neighborhood skyrocketed. By evening, it was clear that HOA Karen had lost control. Her frantic calls to board members, frantic social media posts warning of impending chaos, and endless complaints to neighbors only made her look more unhinged. Meanwhile, Keanu Reeves moved in quietly, unpacked his things, and even offered a smile and a wave to anyone who approached. The neighborhood was polarized. Some residents secretly cheered for Karen's poetic downfall, others admired Keanu's grace under pressure. And me? I knew this was just the beginning. The quiet suburban street I had once taken for granted was now ground zero for one of the most absurd and entertaining HOA battles in history. The stage was set for full-blown chaos. HOA Karen wasn't the type to accept defeat gracefully. By the third day, her schemes became increasingly elaborate. She began conducting unscheduled inspections, marching onto Keanu's property with a notepad in hand, measuring fences, counting garden lights, and scrutinizing every corner of his house. The movers had barely finished unpacking, yet Karen seemed convinced she could find some obscure violation lurking in plain sight. Neighbors whispered from their windows, some giggling at her determination, others holding their breath, unsure how far she would go. It was as if our tiny cul-de-sac had transformed into a stage for a surreal reality show. Despite Karen's attempts, Keanu Reeves remained calm. One afternoon, I saw him walking toward the street, carrying a small tray of drinks, offering them to neighbors who had gathered to watch Karen's antics. "Welcome to the neighborhood," he said with a grin that was so disarmingly genuine it made Karen's face turn bright red. She sputtered, trying to regain control, but her words fell flat against Keanu's charm. Slowly, more neighbors started siding with him, sharing stories of how approachable and kind he was. Karen's credibility was slipping, and she could feel it, though, of course, she would never admit it out loud. Karen tried another tactic, rumor-mongering. She whispered to neighbors that Keanu was planning a private movie set, would host loud parties, and might even block the street with production vehicles. She painted a picture of chaos that was entirely fictional. Of course, the reality couldn't have been further from her stories. Keanu had simply bought the house to enjoy some peace, maybe host a few friends, and live as quietly as possible. Yet, her rumors created tension, forcing some of the more nervous residents to question their loyalties. I watched as a few stragglers called HOA meetings and sent passive-aggressive emails, further fueling the absurdity. Meanwhile, I decided to document everything. Every time Karen inspected, scolded, or lectured neighbors, I captured it on video. Every time Keanu waved, smiled, or politely diffused tension, I recorded it. The contrast was almost comedic. Karen, red-faced and frantic, versus Keanu, calm and gracious. The neighborhood began to quietly admire him, not just for being a celebrity, but for showing patience and kindness in the face of chaos. Karen's tactics, instead of intimidating him, were making her appear petty and irrational. Slowly but surely, her grip on the community was slipping. By the end of the week, the tension had reached a boiling point. Karen announced she was planning a formal HOA action to force Keanu into compliance, or, as she put it, to remind him that no one is above our rules. She spent hours drafting letters, compiling inspection reports, and even contacting attorneys, all while the neighborhood secretly watched, amused. Keanu, however, remained unaffected. He continued to engage with neighbors, quietly building goodwill while Karen spiraled into obsessive fury. What had started as a simple move-in had turned into a full-blown suburban standoff, and it was only a matter of time before the conflict would reach its explosive peak. HOA Karen had reached a point of no return. Her obsession with controlling Keanu Reeves' every move boiled over when she issued a massive violation notice, celebrity disturbances endangering neighborhood tranquility. The letter was filled with legal jargon, citations of obscure bylaws, and even vague threats of fines and litigation. She delivered it in person, flapping the document like a banner of authority. I watched from my porch, phone in hand, as Karen dramatically declared, "This is the final warning. You must comply or face consequences. Meanwhile, Keanu took it all in stride. Calm, composed, and almost amused, he thanked her politely and said he would take it under consideration, leaving Karen speechless and fumbling for words. As the weekend approached, Keanu decided to host a small community event, a casual gathering in his backyard. He invited neighbors to meet, mingle, and enjoy some snacks and music. Word spread quickly, and the turnout exceeded everyone's expectations. Children played safely under the supervision of his staff, while adults chatted with Keanu about his movies, travels, and surprisingly approachable personality. Karen, of course, saw this as an open challenge to her authority. She stormed in, clipboard raised, ready to lecture, issue citations, and enforce her rules. What she didn't expect was the neighborhood uniting behind Keanu. Many residents politely but firmly told her she was overstepping, leaving her red-faced and increasingly desperate. The event became a spectacle. Keanu moved through the crowd with ease, smiling, waving, and even helping to serve refreshments. Neighbors whispered excitedly about how approachable he was, sharing selfies and videos that would soon go viral online. Karen tried multiple times to interrupt, each attempt more awkward than the last. She complained about music volume, the placement of tables, and even the color of balloons. Each time, the crowd politely ignored her, politely redirecting their attention to Keanu. The absurdity of the situation grew more apparent with every passing minute. A Hollywood legend hosting a friendly backyard gathering while HOA Karen flailed helplessly against reality. By mid-afternoon, Karen realized her strategy had completely backfired. Instead of intimidating Keanu or gaining support from neighbors, she had only highlighted her obsession and pettiness. The once feared HOA tyrant now appeared comical, pacing and gesturing in frustration while everyone else laughed, took photos, and enjoyed the event. Keanu's effortless charm and patience turned the situation completely in his favor. Even the most skeptical neighbors began questioning Karen's authority, wondering if her obsession with control had gone too far. It was a turning point. The neighborhood support had shifted, and Karen's credibility had collapsed entirely. As the sun set, the chaos wound down. The gathering ended on a high note, neighbors chatting happily, children waving goodbye, and Keanu quietly retreating to his new home. Karen, on the other hand, retreated to her office, muttering complaints and drafting yet another doomed attempt to assert control. I knew, as I captured the final footage of the event, that the battle was nearing its conclusion. HOA Karen had thrown everything at Keanu Reeves, and he had handled it all with grace, humor, and patience. The showdown had been spectacular, the neighborhood entertained, and the tyrant left floundering. The stage was set for the final resolution, one that would leave everyone laughing, relieved, and, most importantly, victorious. The morning after the epic backyard showdown, it was clear that HOA Karen had officially lost the battle. The neighborhood was buzzing with excitement, recounting every detail of her meltdown at the event. Keanu Reeves, on the other hand, moved about quietly, greeting neighbors with a warm smile and a simple wave. He had won not through confrontation or threats, but through patience, kindness, and sheer charm. Even those who had previously supported Karen began to question her obsessive enforcement of rules. The once feared HOA tyrant was now a punchline, her credibility shattered in front of the entire community. Karen attempted one last desperate maneuver, a formal complaint to the county, claiming that Keanu's presence violated zoning laws. She spent hours drafting documents, sending emails, and making phone calls. Meanwhile, Keanu continued his unassuming routine, watering his garden, chatting with neighbors, and even helping a few elderly residents carry groceries. His calm, approachable demeanor made Karen's frantic attempts seem even more ridiculous. Slowly, even the last of her loyal supporters began to see the absurdity of her crusade. The neighborhood had rallied behind Keanu, and there was no turning back. By midweek, the HOA finally relented. Karen received a polite but firm notice stating that no further action would be taken against Keanu Reeves. Any future attempts to harass or intimidate him could result in legal consequences for the HOA itself. The news spread quickly through the neighborhood, and for the first time in years, there was a sense of relief and jubilation. Neighbors exchanged congratulatory smiles and fist bumps, celebrating not just Keanu's victory, but the end of Karen's oppressive reign. The street felt lighter, happier, and infinitely more welcoming. Keanu, ever humble, didn't make a big show of triumph. He hosted a small thank you gathering in his backyard a few days later. Casual, friendly, and inclusive. He spoke briefly to everyone, expressing gratitude for their support and good humor throughout the chaos. It was the perfect ending. No confrontation, no dramatics, just community, laughter, and shared stories. Children played on the lawn, neighbors mingled, and even Karen lingered at the edge of the gathering, fuming silently but powerless. Keanu's quiet victory had changed the dynamic of the neighborhood forever. Looking back, the experience felt surreal. What began as a simple move-in became an unforgettable saga of HOA tyranny, celebrity calm, and neighborhood unity. Keanu Reeves had arrived quietly, faced absurd rules and harassment, and emerged victorious, not by fighting, but by being himself, kind, patient, and gracious. HOA Karen's reign had ended, the neighborhood celebrated, and life returned to a happier, more peaceful rhythm. And as I captured the final moments on my camera, I realized one thing. Sometimes, the hero you least expect can change everything. And in our case, it was Keanu Reeves.